Hello, 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 and welcome to the Vagabond Way podcast. The journey goes ever on with the long road. This episode, no synths. That's right, you'll find no synths in this week's episode, or probably any episode for that matter. A meeting was called, the long road met to discuss one of the fundamentals of our approach, sticking to acoustic instruments only. No synths, no electric instruments really, but listen on to find out more. Kev Moore tells us of discoveries at a secret record store in Genoa, Italy, and Steve Bonham's Vagabond diary entry takes us somewhere that doesn't exist. The Vagabond Way podcast, featuring The Long Road, is exploring the world of the troubadour, the adventurer, the vagabond. The world isn't beige, it isn't processed, it's authentic, it's rich, and it's real. If those are the sorts of sentiments that make your brain light up, then hop on board. We are embracing all of those things, we're celebrating all of that, and we'd love it if you joined us on the journey. Greetings, I am Chris the Bish Leiden, and welcome to this week's listening PARTY, wherever in the world you are. A jam-packed episode for you this week, so just a brief intro from me. You know, the usual reminders. Check out the Transatlantic Connection show on YouTube for great interviews and songs with artisan musicians. Hear from people in the industry about the current state of things. And if you actually want to see the Long Road's faces, we have a little bit each episode too. And in fact, the next episode that's coming out next week, you will see the Long Road all together. All three of us. How exciting. Anyway, on to today's podcast hashtag content. As you heard in the opening intro, the Long Road this week are discussing why we're sticking to our rule of acoustic instruments only. There was some chit-chat at the end of the segment you're about to hear, which I decided to excise, as it perhaps went too waffly even for the Long Road standards. We stumbled upon, well, I say we, Steve Bonham stumbled upon a new acronym which summed up our style of music, HAM. HAM, heavy acoustic music. Kev did agree that sometimes we ham it up, but I suppose we're not convinced that ham as a term will stick, but who knows. The other thing we talked about, which I got rid of, along the same lines as heavy metal, it's another term that we've been dropping into things over the course of this year, heavy wood. I wouldn't be surprised if this slogan turns up on a t-shirt on our merch table at gigs in 2021. 2021, oh, that sounds funny now I say it out loud, but I suppose it's only a few weeks away now. Here's hoping, we can actually do gigs and stuff. Anyway, I'm going to hand over to myself now for our regular three-way chat between Kev Moore, Steve Bonham and myself. Here we go. Hello podcasters, here we are, the three of us together again, the Long Road together again through our digital chat. We've got Steve at home in Derbyshire. Hello Steve, how you doing?
Hey up, me duck.
Regional introduction achieved, good. And Kev, you're actually in the UK as well, you're in Derbyshire as well. How are you doing?
I'm also in Derbyshire, I'm very well, thanks Chris, yeah.
Now, Kev sent me and Steve a message, he wanted to convene a meeting to discuss something, so I'm going to hand over to Kev, and Kev's going to tell us what this is all about.
Yes, well, basically, chaps, why acoustic? the reason I raised this, one of the songs we've been working on, which by the time you hear this, dear listener, will probably be in its final form, We'll have recorded it somehow. We'll have recorded it. It'll be a fait accompli, whatever it ends up as.
Yeah.
But I had a sort of a electric, very clean, but an electric guitar part for this particular song, because I'm currently very inspired by Jim Capilongo, who plays with Norah Jones in the Little Willies band, an amazing player. I mentioned this briefly to Steve. I got a look of great disapproval from him. Ooh, sharp intake of breath. And he said, I think maybe we can manage it on an acoustic. And I did actually think to myself, well, it was like Queen with their first 4 or 5 albums. They used to print on it quite proudly, no synthesizers, which they didn't, they wouldn't use. I'm probably answering my own question in a way by thinking, because it makes... If you don't go that route, I'm not saying it's easier to play on electric, but it makes you work harder acoustically to try and achieve the same goal, I guess.
Yeah.
And I suppose, I'm throwing it out there. What is it about us staying true to the acoustic vibe that informs our music, helps us be more creative, I suppose.
It's really unusual for me being the role of being a policeman. Nothing's ever happened before, and certainly won't happen again. For me, the acoustic thing is a number of things, I guess. Number one is that one. Actually, it makes you work harder and not sound like other people. And I always remember years ago that I came across some people, and they were advertising people for, this is going somewhere, by the way, they were advertising people in the beer industry in Russia, right? And Russia has a huge problem with alcoholism. One of the ways they were trying to, it was a kind of strange thing, but basically they said, if you're going to do an advert for alcohol, there must be no people in it or animals. They saw where that could go.
PG tips, we're looking at you.
Yeah. Plastered chimps. Drinking Smirnoff. Oh, sorry, we got signed. I can see a great new advert there. Where was I? Oh, yeah. Animals, or in fact, anything moving. I've got the adverts they produced, and they are bizarrely some of the most sexy, sensuous adverts you've ever seen. And there's no people in it. I mean, it sounds a bit pervy. It's not pervy, it's just really clever. And I talked to them, and they said it was brilliant. Because we could do all these things, we had to work a lot harder. And I think we've done that. I mean, so that'd be one bit of answer. A second answer is, I guess for me, I personally have always loved loud acoustic music. My acoustic sensibility comes from early Rod Stewart and mandolin wind, and there was so much acoustic instrument over there. The drums really being played loud and not put through all sorts of filters and things. The bands like Lindisfarne at the time, they were just really heavy. It feels raw, it feels immediate.
And I suppose the thing about the acoustic instruments for me is that perhaps they speak more directly to the human soul than it might be if it's something that's going through an amp.
Yes.
That there is this sort of connection between the fingers on the strings of a guitar and then the production of the sound, and it's sort of immediate. Your brain accepts it as a natural thing, and I wonder whether that's part of the appeal for me. I mean, obviously we break the rule ourselves a little bit.
Yes, can I throw in the word Hammond there, Chris?
Yeah, I mean the Hammond organ, which I think we'd all be hard pushed to activate if we didn't have an electricity supply. I don't fancy pushing the bellows on one of those to make that spin around.
Well, yes, I mean it's related to the harmonium,
Yeah, exactly. You can see where it comes from, Back in the day, you could absolutely employ a peasant boy to run the church harmonium and keep that going up and down.
Dare I say, it fits in with our organic remit.
Yes, there we are. I think we're all agreed that the Hammond organ, whilst it might be electrified, it's an acoustic instrument absolutely through and through.
Yeah.
And it's an artisan instrument. It's one of those ones where actually it's got such a character to it in itself. It tells its own little story in its sound production.
As you know, I mean, I'm very wary because it's so big and makes such a lot of noises. It's always like an old washing machine is going to explode any second on you. But I've got a feeling, show you my ignorance, there's air moving through it.
Oh, yeah.
And whereas on the synth, there's no air moving through it, and maybe that qualifies
Yeah,
it.
that probably does. Yeah.
But the thing that I love about our approach to acoustic music is that, kind of as you both said, it makes us work harder. It makes us think differently. And I think that's really important, that actually, a bunch of our songs you could easily do with just sort of a straightforward guitar, bass, drums, standard, pop group if you like.
Yeah.
But the thing that we always do to ourselves is, what's the right thing to do on here that's different?
Yeah.
We don't just do things differently because we can. It's always about making the world that we're in richer or more dark or more exquisite, or we're always trying to amplify, if you'll pardon the pun,
too many puns going on here.
we're always trying to increase the effect of what we're adding.
By playing by those rules, I think it means we really celebrate the nuances in the music, because one of the tools you have to use if you're consigned to just acoustic instruments, light and shade.
Yeah.
Of which I think we use that quite a lot in our work.
Yeah. And for me personally, on the piano, I spend most of my time playing electric pianos, where you get a great sound and get the sense of there being a big acoustic range to it, but it's still all synthesized. It's all might be sampled, it might be very well sampled, but it's still created. Whereas when we get to go to the studio, playing a real piano, and just simple things that I'd never thought about until working with the piano at Woodworm, really, was the sound of the pedal being depressed.
Yeah.
Plays a part in the sound of the piano.
Yeah.
And I remember there was something we recorded, one of the first things me and Steve recorded 1,000 years ago there, and I was going, "What's that noise, Stuart?" To Stuart, the engineer. And he goes, that's the piano. I'm like, "Yeah, no, that's the piano, but what's that clunking sound?" I said, "That's the pedal." And I was like, "Oh yeah, there's mechanics in that pedal that add to the whole sound of the piano." And when you push the pedal down and you release a load of the strings, you get lots more ambient noise than when the pedal isn't
all those
down.
overtones.
Before you've even played something.
Yeah.
You can't get that from just recording a piano part on GarageBand. I mean, I'm sure Apple are working very hard to work out how can you achieve that. But you literally can't beat a real live piano.
I think the other bit to the acoustic, it is a fantasy, but it's a nice fantasy. 3 guys turning up at a place and just playing, not taking in the PA and the mixer. And I know it's fantasy, but it's a nice fantasy. It kind of goes back to the roots of what we're doing.
Yes.
We just sit down and play, and that's part of it for me too.
But I remember years ago, I was doing a gig it must have been in Paris, thinking about it, with a band. Big old club venue. Going on stage, all the power went off. Every bit of power in the place went off. The lights went out, all the PA went, everything off. And we were literally about to start this gig. 800 people watching us, going, right, what are they going to do now? This was Liz Green, who's a singer from Manchester. She's on sabbatical right now. She's not doing gigs and things. But she was like, well, what do we do? And we were like, we don't know. So she just started singing. She got a guitar and she started singing, and she got people clapping along. And it wasn't a song that any of us had prepared, but it was just a song that she had in her head. And she got 800 people singing and clapping along in the dark in this club in Paris. Electricity be damned at that point.
Yes.
That was, that boils down to the power of acoustic music, is that it's about human beings connecting. I guess.
And there'll be people in that audience will still remember that moment, Chris.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It was spine tingling, really. It was amazing. Now, what song to play? Well, because I essentially get to just choose this bit myself, and sometimes my reasoning isn't super strong, and really, does it have to be? Simply because this is one of our recent songs that I really love, and it includes a Hammond organ, which featured in our acoustic chat just now. Here we go, our release from a couple of months ago. It's called On a Bridge Across the River.
On a Sunday morn, on a bridge across the river, such a weed was in the air, we're called on to deliver. A preacher who was calling out to let the good Lord in. You wanna appreciate the cure you gotta know the sin. Good news is hard to come by, so let me give it to you. The football fans just passed by, though some said hallelujah. The kids they roll on shoulders to the tights and the lane. The young men they just hollered out to lose would be a shame. their beer with the Kansas City Chiefs. He cried you all deceived yourselves, so the drummers played a role. And a dark-haired girl in a leather band, so far my soul. Set us free. Hey, my Lord, set us free. Who wants to try the heaven? Who's heading down to hell? You the chance to repent your crimes and tolling off the bell. Tomorrow's not a promise, the good Lord does insist. You refuse to change your ways, you're on old Satan's list. Girls who knew a thing or two sang that ain't how it's gonna be. Hey, Lord, set us free. Hey, my Lord, set us free. Hey, Lord, you set us free.
Vagabond diary today is a bit of an odd one, I must confess. It's about a place I haven't been to yet, principally because it doesn't exist. Or if it exists in the pieces of memory sort of assembled together in a jigsaw that doesn't quite fit. It's the swamps, the world of the marsh and the delta and the swamp. I think it's come to mind this week because I've been reading the book Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens, a brilliant evocation of the marshes that join onto the sea in North Carolina. The idea of a place being swampy and the music being swampy is something that teases around the edges of my imagination more or less all the time. I try and be creative. So what is this place? What is it about? Swampy. It's where the dark and the light meet and dance together. There are no edges or borders in a swamp, no horizons, no limits. It's a place that isn't. It isn't the sea and isn't the land. It's a place where people live in roughly made shacks, half on the land, half over the water, with verandas on which an old rocking chair sits and a fishing line dangles in the water. It's heat and shade, a place where the incessant noise of modern life can't reach. It's light and shadows. It's a hiding place where you can make your own life or music. It's a place of monsters and mystery. There's a wonderful line of trashy horror films. The Swamp Thing, the giant leeches, shadows in the swamp. And the little more upmarket Southern Comfort, directed by Walter Hill, with a marvellous score by Ry Cooder. I think I love the image and the place because it seems to be a place you can make your own rules and make your own music. To me, it's always had a sound. It's a sound that we've never quite nailed, but we've been trying to for 20 years. It's a sound that includes New Orleans and Cajun and rock and Raikuda and even the music of Cuba. So what does swampy sound like? That's difficult. Maybe it's Somewhere Down the Crazy River by Robbie Robertson, in which he follows the sound of the jukebox from up the levee down to fields that are empty and sits in the back of an abandoned 59 Chevy listening to Little Willie John. But hey, I'm not even sure that song's set in the swamps themselves. It mentions Kokomo, which is in Indiana. But that's the point of swampy. It's a sound, it's a sense, it's a state of mind. We've been trying to write swampy songs for a long time. I think we're getting close. We are getting close in some of our new music. Waiting on the Storm definitely has the air of the swamp about it. But, you know, a way back, Chris was playing some lazy, wonderful chords in fifths on the piano. And we captured them, and that song became The Last Minute of Forever, which is probably as swampy as life can be.
They were the good times, the times of shooting stars, when the smile across a crowded room said, "Hey boy, don't you go too far." You were the one, you were the one, but this will must be, this will be the last minute of forever. They were the good times, and your fingers touched my skin, when you opened up your heart to me and let this fool rush in. You were the one, you were the one, but this will must be, this will be the last minute of forever. They were the good times as we played a game of chance, lost our hearts in a crazy world. We're living in a trance. You were the one, you were the one, but this will must be, this will be the last minute of forever. outlaws on the run, holding up in some cheap hotel as the shackles came undone. You were the one, you were the one, but this will must be, this will be the last minute of forever.
Got to do some quick shout outs for that track. It was released by Stephen Meyer's old band Dr. Big Love years ago. So there was Sammy Carter on vocals there, Dave Greenland and Dave Burgess on flugelhorn / trumpet. I can't remember exactly who played what on this album now, but they on this whole album they were both playing trumpet and probably I think both playing flugel at one point. Anyway, Chris Birch on trombone, our old pal Tim Gadsby on bass, Ben Adcock on drums, and me, I'm doodling around on piano and vocals and percussion and stuff there. Steve noodling around on guitar and lead vocals there. And as it happens, this song has just been re-released into the world on Spotify, etc. The album is called The Naked Juggler by Dr. Big Love. If you want to check it out, if you Google for it, you'll find it on Spotify, Apple Music, all the usual places.
Hello again and welcome to Kev's Cafe Corner. This week, dear listeners, we're going to head to the city of Genoa in Italy, a place I've visited many times over the years, and it's a lovely, lovely city, very vibrant and a lot of history there. And one time when I was there, I was wandering around the old part of the town through the old alleyways and back streets, and on a particular day in the week, I don't know which day it was, but they set up a lot of sort of market stalls, semi-temporary, and they sort of clog the already narrow streets and people bustling around them and with all sorts of wares. And one time I found this record store hidden away in the back streets of Genoa, and it supplied me with a couple of real nice, what I considered rarities really at the time, records I wasn't aware of, CDs. And one of them was by Gail Ann Dorsey, the superb bass player singer that's probably best known for playing with Bowie, but I discovered her earlier on when she released her debut solo album, The Corporate World, on Warner Brothers, and really, really loved her playing and her writing and her singing. And I discovered in this little stall her second album called Rude Blue, which I hadn't been aware of its existence, and she'd signed to Island Records, signed by Island's Chris Blackwell in fact, to record this album, and that was a real beauty, not least because it featured a superb version of Dave Mason's Feeling Alright, but just the fact that I discovered she'd recorded a second album which I hadn't been aware of, so that was a great discovery. And also an oddity that I also had never heard of, called the New York Rock and Soul Review. And this was a live concert from Madison Square Garden. And the cover sort of piqued my interest. I turned it over and looked on the back, and it was a veritable who's who. I mean, Donald Fagen, Michael McDonald, Boz Scaggs, Phoebe Snow, an incredible list of musicians. And I bought this album, and it really is one of the finest live concerts I've ever heard. It was worth the price of admission just for Phoebe Snow's version of At Last. It was quite incredible. And it was just amazing to find these things in the back streets of an Italian city. and for a very fair price, I might add. And that's another thing that I just love, the surprises that these places throw up. Firstly, just discovering a little record store hidden away like that. And secondly, the reward for you taking your time to rummage through every single box they have there, because quite often you can be looking through 100 CDs until you find one of worth for your own taste. But it is worth that effort. It's worth looking for the needle in the oral haystack. So that's that was a really nice day out in Genoa record hunting. Whether I continue this series of record shop discoveries, dear listener, I'm not sure. We shall see. But there will be a Kev's Cafe Corner next week, and I'll be talking about something. Take it easy.
My Bishop's Daily Bread entry this week is a stone cold recipe. There's no two ways about it. I'm channeling my very best inner Nigella here. If this isn't your bag, skip ahead a couple of minutes. I made a massive crumpet-based breakthrough recently, and I've shared it with just about anyone who happened to ask how any baking was going, and so now I am sharing it with you, just in case. How to make crumpets. Now, you need fresh baking powder. That's what I've learned in recent months. Fresh baking powder. Instant yeast that's recent enough. I'm specifically not saying fresh yeast, as that's something else, and it's not something I've ever explored myself. I'm sure you can make crumpets with fresh yeast, but I don't know how to. And also make sure you order yourself a nice set of non-stick crumpet rings from the internet. The set I ordered work an absolute treat and very reasonably priced. So this recipe actually does double up quite nicely as well, but for 6 crumpets you need 150 grams of plain flour, 200 mils of water, and half a teaspoon of salt. Put that into a bowl or a large jug. Now whisk it for 5 minutes. The original recipe I'm working from, Warburton's, made jokes about doing it until your arm hurts, ha ha ha. And I'm like, hello, I'll use an electric whisk, thanks. So, 5 minutes of whisking with an electric whisk, or manually if you so desire. I set a timer because obviously I set a timer. After 5 minutes, add half a teaspoon of sugar, 1 teaspoon of baking powder, and 1 teaspoon of instant yeast, and whisk that together for another 30 seconds. So now cover this bowl or jug and leave it to rest in a warm place for 15 minutes. I actually left mine for 30 minutes last time and it was just fine. And that's your batter made. Next, heat a pan on low-medium heat and put your crumpet rings in it. Spray them with a little oil. Use a ladle to drop enough batter into the rings to fill sort of, I guess, half full, maybe just under half full, but only just. It's probably around 60 grams of batter or so. Now, I found that at a low-medium heat, 8 minutes was just about spot on for getting them cooked all the way through. By the end of my first double batch of making crumpets, I literally dropped the batter into the rings, set a timer for 8 minutes, and went and sat down for the duration. They look after themselves, really. For the real keen beans, i.e. me, I actually would spend between minute 7 and minute 8 with a very sharp knife quietly popping any of the big bubbles on top of each crumpet, because, and this is the vital thing for me, they've got to have the holes on the top. They've just got to, so that the butter can melt into the crumpets. That's the point of a crumpet. Anyway, so a few bubble poppings, the tops edging ever nearer to set after those 8 minutes, but perhaps not quite fully set yet. The bottoms are brown and nice and crispy. It's also essential in my book. So once the tops are very nearly done, I whip the rings off with some cooking tongs. The rings will be hot, and just flip the crumpets over for 30 seconds of just finishing the top off. And because I've already popped the bubbles and ensured that there are holes, this flip and finish just makes sure that the batter is all cooked at the top. But you've still got the holes. Previous attempts I've made with the flip have just, cooked the holes up, covered them up. Not the ideal crumpet that I was aiming for. Anyway, 30 seconds off the heat and onto a rack to cool. There you go, crumpets made. Toast butter, perhaps some delicious jam or honey for a savoury spin, some nice cheddar cheese and a quick couple of minutes under the grill to melt, perhaps a dollop of nice red onion chutney to go with it for a lovely lunch. Crumpets, yes. Actually remarkably easy to make once you've got a good recipe, and so delicious. Highly recommended. And that's it. That's the segment this week. Bishop's Daily Bread finally delivers an actual recipe. Enjoy. That's it for this week. Thanks for listening wherever in the world you are. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. We're on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify, Amazon Podcasts. The next episode will be out next Friday. Join us on YouTube for the Transatlantic Connection show and become part of the Transatlantic Connection movement. Head to youtube.com/thevagabondway. All of our music is available on Bandcamp, where you can help support a positive ecosystem for the music industry. Download, streaming, vinyls, CDs, it's all there. thevagabondway.bandcamp.com. We're also on Patreon at patreon.com/thevagabondway. Big thank you to our Patreons and a special shout out to Orla Flynn, James Lydon, Stuart Lydon, Yvette Lydon and Trish Taylor. Thank you for your ongoing support. Patreon is a great platform that makes it super easy for anyone out there, you, to support content that you love on a monthly basis. It gives you direct access to the people creating the stuff you love, us, hopefully, and you get to play an integral part in shaping the direction of the things that we make. So, become a Vagabonder. That's our name for our supporters on Patreon, to help us create music, live performances, books and short stories, this weekly podcast, our YouTube show, and some new things that we're cooking up. As a Vagabonder, you can get the recordings and books we make for free, receive exclusive Patreon-only merchandise in the post, get regular behind-the-scenes updates from us, unlock access to exclusive live-stream performances and Q&As, and lots more. You can help us create something different, something that entertains, and something that inspires others. So, join us on the journey and release the Vagabond within. Patreon.com/thevagabondway. Thank you once again, brave adventurers, vagabonds and explorers, for joining us on the Vagabond Way. Remember, the world isn't beige. It's authentic, it's rich, and it's real. Embrace every last bit of it. Until next time, the journey goes ever on with the long road. Bye for now.